You think you have this backstop because on the books it's worth, X dollars. Let's say it's like worth $5 a coin. But what you're not realizing is the real risk is when FTX can't pay you back, they probably can't pay anyone back. But it was very clear the internal conversations were they knew they were committing fraud. They knew they were doing things wrong. And this idea was, well, no one's going to catch us, right? Nobody's on Twitter. I probably butchered his name. But he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in. And everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So they kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, we think they're insolvent because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the tokens. Victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I'd been scammed by this guy, and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So
Yeah,
how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto money, how can you view this as a battle? But he viewed it as we're sparring partners. And you won this round or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
Lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams.
Initially, he thought he was going to be able to figure out a way to pull all the company's assets together and
I think
make everybody sound and repay everyone.
Because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that, you have $1, I'll let you trade with $100, and that's going to be one reason you come to my offshore exchange. I can offer you more leverage than the guys who are Tom Brady backs him. Well, Tom Brady's got to have some guys who are looking into this. And then it's BlackRock backed him. Well, BlackRock definitely has some guys who looked into it. Right. It's Sequoia Capital. They said he was the account fiat at FTX. And so what prosecutors are now arguing is he knew, of course, what it was. He deliberately obscured that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. What is the difference between the two?
If you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, CZ has connections to China. Maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here. Maybe that's a big deal.
Party.
That's right. But
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So Sam knew publicly in our current American climate,
do something like that. Why would he publicly communicate?
This is this is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. This is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing. When you withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to this random external address because you send it to a different one. I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay. I'm not going to stop making these videos. They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just you win. Crypto is sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So look at the Turkish lira. That's the issue was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who pushed over the House made fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire. He's sort of the next Warren Buffett, that when everything goes wrong, $10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're call the police and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? To a guy who enabled God or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just
well, how does he skate on that? How?
And and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And, I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Like,
it's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. Washington, and I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, "Oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington" or something like that. But like, it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down. Because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me on. Let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, we
easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot.
And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I study, after the fact, he's like, he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
Don't invest. Like, that's a bad idea.
People were calling bullshit, though. Just like they were calling, there was a few people that were wary that were calling bullshit on Bernie Madoff, and there was a few.
I mean, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane, but Sam wanted to basically influence politics by just donating. And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have your A1Z, A16Z, it was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. So all the, right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, like, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum?
Go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into from the arms of one huckster to another. Like it's just like almost to something worse. There are CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know. Whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to. He's doing interviews with that. Fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt. And he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. And basically shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch of teas for a while. But so I eventually pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers. And I wanted somebody to say to me, but even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit. Like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no lied my way into it, I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff. The senator's office reached out to me. And they're like, what do you think about this? And I was like, I don't know, man. You guys have to, this is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had a look at their books. Like it was very opaque of was going on. Now he's still trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent. And right now, actually, the big kind of scam
chemtrails.
Let me say this: if it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. You do not get to that level and not know that things were wrong.
Well, reading her tweets about amphetamine use was pretty wild too. The whole scene was wild.
You put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is Tornado Cat. Everything. I don't have access to the book. Like, I basically knew nothing. So anytime you'd call him out on an issue, you'd say, "Where's the money?" He goes, "Well, I don't know. It's gone. It's Alameda Research. Ask Alameda."
Each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. Like, it sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Like, Sam was just hopped up on amphetamine, and she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't gonna fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. So the person's not named in the report who was donating to Democrats. We know the one donating to Republicans was Ryan Salami, but that person eventually. But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me ours, and I'd go because it was like my friends like said, hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was like kind of fascinated, and you'd see these guys. That is his background, and so I asked, Sam. I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy
regulated, like if he was doing this, like Coinbase can't do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, Coinbase is much more heavily scrutinized. They actually have to file with the SEC. I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist. They're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just like, all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. So like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So, hey, you're going to be the guy. Like, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like, it had gotten scandal now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep.
Jamie's looking it up.
I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and now I don't want to say the wrong one. A16Z.
A16. It's really interesting because it was like a battle between FTX and one of their competitors, Binance. So the owner of Binance is, I think it's Changpeng Zhao. He goes by C. To store your money somewhere else. How do you store it? So there's this idea of like these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that like, hey, if you're someone like me, I don't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college and all my friends get an MLMs, multi-level marketing, sort of like just like the like, hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich seminars. Reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says...
and sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today or still in operation today? Would they not crash? No. Or was this or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? It's big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but, right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. You can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on-chain all our just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see them in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch. You can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Or system to where they could see you, Joe, deposit a Bitcoin on FTX. They could grab that Bitcoin and start trading with it immediately.
Wow.
even though they were never supposed to be able to wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these. Like, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down, and instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take like, he's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Ethereum, what are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with Reg, it wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful, that you just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking and probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was somebody found out about this God mode. And so the lawyer's like, how do we basically cover this up? Dan Friedberg's like, how do we, what do you want me to do? And he's like, hey, was going to undo sort of everything. Like, if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work, because if you're most of this 10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, sort of information about that. He says, hey, we're actually success. 2 months, you're going to be making 5 figures a month. 10 months, maybe 6 figures a month. And I've done it for people before. That's the social proof. I've shown people how to do this. So he called it fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled. It's kind of too good to be true, but the social proof is overwhelming, and it overwhelms your kind of like alarm bells. So the social proof is a combination of things. So first of all, it's like pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on...
I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like, one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and, I have to do that. I hadn't really found my footing. But throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with, like, hucksters and fraud, where, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer outright. The proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became I too am safe because Tom Brady's got his money there. So I can put my money
So is the lure is like how Bitcoin used to be worth very little, and then one time it was with the high of Bitcoin.
Middleman, because there's no one who controls like Bitcoin. Like, no one can say like no to a transaction. Now it's like there's nothing to stop you from sending that money, and then you sort of, this is a fraud because no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme. So they were paying everybody to promote this FTX crypto exchange, and the idea is this is the next big thing, right? And this is where you're going to make money. And ultimately, one of the ways, like, even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about, and they were like donating through them for like all these you're like, it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat, very treatable kind of cancer, and she's fine. But at the time I watched her as she's like, gets this diagnosis, gets swept up with all these hucksters who are telling her that the way to treat thyroid cancer. So I decided to start pursuing it step by step. And at first it was like just me discovering like, well, what is this? Well, how does this scheme work? Okay, so I buy this course, and then what? And then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX...
And then when you have them on, there's a lot of, I wasn't aware, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that, I don't know. There was all this hemming and...
fight, like, one of the best ways to fight crime is at their wallets, like, like take away their banking. And crypto has just really revitalized that because where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like you put them around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in. So you kind of think you're swimming safely with like other savvy investors. And that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. Your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store
Crypto.
Ransomware. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Because before it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much screw company. So they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage. Nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes. So even though they said, like, we're not going to touch your money, as soon as you deposited Bitcoin, I talked to some of the insiders at Alameda. They said they had this back door. These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? Appreciate your transparency. All these kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter space interactions with him, and he kept getting away with the fact that I started hearing about these tokens. And they're like, hey, selling courses, like it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping is not a money system. Yeah, especially in our modern age, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person, of ads, like get-rich-quick schemes. Like you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis telling you, they're like 25 years old telling you, you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. He's like, well, like think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. That's what ultimately matters is how much do you have on deposits that you owe out? And so with Binance, we don't really know. The only one we have a little bit more of a look into is inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So we're just going to do a few transactions through your name. That just came out in a press release. It's the new charges. He was basically like they call them straw donors, because it's like, if I give money to you to give, this stuff went down. And a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of, Sam goes, oh, you won like our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customer abilities? It's hard to know. So people really just take you at face value, and they have to trust that, like, oh, other people are invested, so I guess I'll jump in too.
And that's
a lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about it's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay.
Bizarre that so many people got duped. And I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things. Why the celebrities are important. And that's why
it's a huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm,
one guy who lost a hard drive and who's paying people to go through a landfill to try to find his hard drive because there's billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin on that hard drive.
Yeah, people lose the son of Harvard lawyers. We just sort of can't lose. And nobody paid attention to some of the red flags that were going on until ultimately it was too late. It turns out he was not having sort of like, it's maybe not big enough. They're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding. They've recently been shut down, but the idea was
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better?
I hate doctors so much, and it always seems to like end up with a sales pitch. Like it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't assets. You can check yourself. Like, I have $1 billion in USDC. Well, that's great. But it doesn't matter if I have $1 billion in crypto, Bitcoin, whatever, if I owe $2 billion.
Right. I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
service that said, you cannot move, like when I deposit with you, you're not going to touch my money. And I said, Sam, if that's true, where's the money of all these people, all these other wallets, that it's impossible to know which of those new wallets my dollar's from. It's like, it's just crazy. It's a crazy idea. Regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations, how does a guy like that not wind up getting indicted?
I ask myself that every day. There's so many.
Is it a matter of time, or is it
what they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady? They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, well, there was fungibility between wallets.
And a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that first of all, it was amazing that he felt like he could
do. They have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it, we're not going to move it. That's what FTX, or you were a grandma who just put one Bitcoin on there, or, more likely the grandson. He treated all the accounts the same. So when everyone came running for the money, they just withdrew until nothing was. They bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also reputable. So by the third interview, I'd studied him and I said, okay, how do we get down to FTX's responsibility in this whole thing? And I kept coming back to, it was the terms of, I saw this and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something. Why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video just on sticks or something. Like it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? You're, now if you're some criminal, laundering money has just never been easier. Instead of taking $100,000 across the border or wiring it where it can get held up by a bank, he said, well, hey, can we restructure all this money that went through me like a loan so that we can, say that I took a loan out and I was donating so we didn't violate any laws. They never ended up doing that. Now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people like kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they'd like to get paid.
Everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter Spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter Space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey, to their other friends, they're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people, what are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then there was already all this worry in the past. That summer, there had been a bunch of companies that collapsed, and people had never thought FTX. It was kind of the first time anyone thought FTX could maybe not have the money, Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of two Harvard lawyers, what that was, to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our balance.
I don't really understand what's going, like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one. Because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all,
to expose, but like I'm interested in the characters who perpetuate fraud because they're such interesting psychological case studies. Sam Bankman-Fried, you could probably write a whole book about, launches FTX in 2019, and that's a crypto platform where honestly you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. He cleaned up on all his own customers. just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out.
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And right, the inflation rate I think is like 75% or something like that. Like it's an unimaginable. It's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time. Really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that.
Put like let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But a lot, there were some margin trading accounts. And I'm like, no, but there were people who didn't trade with margin. There were people who just put their money with you. And all they wanted, or he broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just like, when are they going to find out? He happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have...
he launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to he'd be afraid of being indicted. Or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal. He blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer smart thing, which is something like this happens, you shut up. You don't say anything.
Right.
And then you point at your boss. I mean, that's basically what they did.
Oof.
Which they for sure did stuff wrong, too. He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he kept making the videos. And ultimately, they never did. But I start doing that, and after I cover get-rich-quick schemes for a while, executives Ryan Salami or something, I think that's his last name, Salami, I don't know, I just don't know how to pronounce it, but he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party.